Okay, everyone, welcome to the breakdown of this ice cream melt effect that I've done previously. This animation is a promotional piece that I did for the summer sale of my courses. Check them out if you haven't. They are all over Instagram, or you can just go to learn.jonathanlindgren.com. Anyways, let's jump into the breakdown. So as you probably know, these breakdown videos aren't really step-by-step tutorials. We recreate something from scratch, guideline of how I created a certain animation or still, or how I achieved a certain effect. So I go through the steps, but we use the finished artwork as a base rather than creating something from the beginning. So if you are used to using Cinema 4D or any 3D software, this should give you all the tools and tips necessary to create a similar effect, I think. So this is the project file that we are looking at. As you can tell, there's not a lot of stuff going on here. We can hop out of our Redshift camera here that I've set up. We got a pretty long lens on this one to get like a really geometric view of this. And I've set it up to a null, which is basically put in the center of the scene, so I can like rotate around the subject really easily. In this one in particular, we aren't really doing a lot with the camera. I have put on a vibrate tag, which you can find over at animation tags and then vibrate. And I'm just vibrating it just a tiny bit in each of the rotational attributes with a really low frequency. And this kind of creates a very organic, almost like handheld effect that I wanted to create. If we just turn off all of the volume measure and volume builders, we can preview this in real time because these are pretty heavy to run. So I'll just deactivate the volume measure and the volume builder and also the smoothing, I think. And if we just go ahead and play this, you can kind of see how the camera, shifts around in a very natural and nice way, which is kind of the effect that I wanted to achieve. So as I've already spoiled, we are doing all of this within a volume measure and volume builder. There's no like simulation or anything advanced going on. There are some very, very simple and neat tricks for this one, and it sells the effect, so why overcomplicate things? If we just hop out to our perspective view, we can kind of view this setup from different angles. So just to kind of break it down, I'll go ahead and turn off everything except for the main body here. So I'll turn off the subtract cube here. I'll turn off the melt spheres as well. And I'll just expand the main body just so we can see what is happening here. So the main body of the ice cream is just basically a cloner with this extruded rectangle here. So if I just go ahead and deactivate this, you can see what this is. And we're basically just rotating this cloner setup so we get a nice flower shape. If you want to increase or decrease this, you can do that. If you want to try out a different look, I'll keep it at 5. And I'll also go ahead and deactivate the taper and the displacer, just so we can kind of see this from the bare bones. And I'll just hide the stick as well, just so we can kind of focus on the main shape here. So as you can tell, the only thing that's really happening with the animation is just this like downward, slightly tilting motion, just to kind of try and imitate a melting sort of effect. And if we just hop into our timeline, we can see the main body attributes here. So we are first off animating the Y position. I'm just going to hide the rotation animations here just so we can focus on the Y. And I kind of have this like stoppage position here where we basically pause for a tiny bit and then it kind of keeps melting, almost as if something is breaking off internally that is hindering it from continuing to melt. And I've also keyframed the rotation P and rotation B to kind of not make it seem like a stiff, like linear movement downwards. So this is kind of the effect, and then we just build on top of that. I've used a taper deformer to kind of just expand the bottom part as it's melting. So as it's melting downwards, it kind of expands outwards across all sides. So I'll just go ahead and reactivate that so you can see what this does. So I've keyframed this from almost this pausing position here that we have. So it starts to expand like somewhere around here. And it kind of just expands outwards until like 51% in this case, which really does the job. And on top of that, I also wanted some form of like irregularities in this shape. So I applied a displacer, which I've set up with a linear field as well. So it's not affecting the entire shape. And I've also keyframed the height of the displacement basically from the get-go, so it kind of starts to displace more and more and more as we go along. So this is kind of like the main animation doing its work. And obviously this is not the entire effect, but this is the kind of like bare bones of it. So the reason why we are using a volume builder as well is because you can kind of blend different shapes, subtract things in a very fluid way. It is heavy to work with, but you usually work in really like low resolution. So for example, I can set this to 0.5 or like 1 as I'm working, so I can scrub along and see things happening. Currently, it's basically just taking our main shape and turning it into a volume, but I've also added this cube here. So I'll just go ahead and activate this, which is called the subtract cube. And it does exactly what you think. It subtracts from the floor. And this is kind of important to get the like right curvature around the edges of whatever is melting out around this. You might think that you can just, shoot it down through the floor because you won't really see a difference, but I think it definitely helps sell the effect and the realism of it. So obviously this is very low res right now, so I'll just go ahead and turn it back to 0.25, which is the resolution that I was working with. Now, obviously, I can't really play this in real time, but it doesn't really matter. We can view all of the effects without the volume builder as we're working, and I'll just kind of show you what we are doing within the volume builder, like back and forth a bit. So the cube here kind of just does the cutting off point around the floor. So as you can tell, like we have these like really nice curves as if the liquid is really, wrapping around the surface of the floor compared to when I deactivate the cube and it's just basically just going straight through the floor, which is what we don't want. So one of the most important aspects of this effect is obviously this fluid that melts out from the ice cream shape. And to do that, I just used a sphere. So I'll just show this one at first because the Melt 2 sphere is basically the exact same thing. So I'll just reactivate the Melt 01 here. And I'll just go ahead and deactivate the volume builder and volume measure at this point, and also the displacer and melt. So what this is basically just a sphere that I've scaled down in the Y attribute here, so we kind of get a bit more of a squished down shape. I've placed it roughly around where I want the melting effect to be happening. And what I'm doing as well is keyframing the radius, so it grows outwards using the attributes from the sphere, but it doesn't do that a ton. Most of the expanding and animation comes from these deformers, so what I'm using at first is a melt deformer, which is a deformer that I really like. So I've keyframed the strength attribute here, so you can see that this kind of grows outwards a lot here. And what's really cool with a melt deformer, I think, is that you can cut off things like as if it was a floor using the position of the deformer. However, in our case, since we are using this subtract cube on all of the contents of the volume builder, we don't really need that in this case. So I just placed it at the center of the sphere in this case. And with the melt deformer, you can also control the melted size of the sphere. So for example, if I go along here and adjust this attribute, you can see that the melted size grows depending on the strength of the deformer attribute. So you can also increase or decrease the noise scale. I was pretty happy at 66, so I'll just leave it at that. And to add some further irregularities, I also used a displacer with a height of 5 centimeters. So we'll just go ahead and activate that. And for the shading of the displacer, I just used a standard noise within Cinema 4D. And I set the scale to quite high, so somewhere around 200%, just to spread out the noise details so it's not, too fine of a displacement. I've also set the animation speed to 0.1, so the noise very subtly moves around as we scrub along the timeline. And if I set this to, for example, 5, you can see, what kind of crazy stuff it can do. But obviously I want this to be a very smooth, liquidy surface. So 0.1 will do really good for me. And we'll just go ahead and reactivate the volume measure and volume builder just so we can see how this looks with everything melted together. And that's looking super sick. So yeah, we can just go ahead and reactivate the Melt 2 sphere here, which is the exact same shape. I've just changed the displacement seed, I believe. So it's 666 in this one and 665 in the other one. And I mean, if you want to move this around, I've locked the Y-axis for my move tool here, just so I'm dragging it along the X and Z axis. So, I mean, yeah, this is very, comfortable, customizable way of working. I just keep it as it works. I really like the shape that it creates here. Now, a lot of the heavy bits within this volume builder happens when we start to smooth things. And I kind of found that smoothing certain parts of it worked best, since we still kind of want the main shape to maintain its shape without getting smooth too much, while as the fluid here melting outwards, we kind of want that to be really, liquidy and not have much definition. So what I did within the volume builder here, as you can tell, I put the melt 1 and 2 spheres within a separate folder and put a smoothing effect on top of that only affects these ones. And then I have a separate smoothing that affects everything below. So if I just go ahead and deactivate the main smoothing here, I can see what that does to the effect. And then I have the separate smoothing here just for these melting spheres that I can control separately. So I mean, I could even increase this to 6, for example, if I wanted to. And then I have this additional smoothing effect that kind of applies it across the entire shape. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and reset this to the previous value. So to create a new folder, for example, within a volume builder, you just hit this little folder icon here, and then you can just drag stuff in that you would like. So yeah, super easy way of working. So I also have the main body object here at the bottom. So that's everything that is contained within the volume measure. Now, with all of that in place, I was really happy with the effect, but there was some additional stuff that I wanted to add, which was, for example, a kind of smoothing effect that happens from the top downwards, as if, the rays from the sun is really, melting this at the top of the shape. So I added this smoothing deformer, which you can find under the deformers tab right here. So if we activate this, I also set the iterations to a quite high value. So if we activate this, it's also important to note that I put this within the volume measure hierarchy and not below the volume builder. So I'm smoothing the volume mesh and not the meshes within the volume builder. So important to note. And kind of what's driving this is a linear field. So if I just pull this up and down, you can see here that as I'm pulling this up and down, I'm smoothing the shape as if it's like getting wet and starts to melt away. So needless to say, I've keyframed this in the y-axis. So we can just look at the curve of this here. So it starts to melt at the beginning and it kind of just softly feathers out. Just add some extra finesse to the top here of the shape. Now with that, the effect is almost done. It's looking really, really nice, but the additional thing that I obviously wanted to add, since it is a ice cream, it's a popsicle, so you kind of want the stick that comes with the popsicle, right? So I'll just go ahead and unhide that. Now the problem that you have with this popsicle stick is that you can't really put it below the main body null that we have animated, but we wanted to follow the main body shape, right? So it kind of sticks, pun intended, to the main shape. Now to parent something without putting it under the actual object in the hierarchy, you can add a constraint tag, it's called. It's under rigging tags, constraint, and if you just go ahead and activate parent here, you can add whatever body you want it to parent to. Do note that it parents from the frame that you parented. So for example, if I parented it somewhere around here and I don't have it in position, it will kind of follow from that point onwards. So just make sure that you parent it at the desired location. And you can also decide which kind of attributes you want it to follow. I just needed it to follow the position and rotation in my case. And with that, it follows the animation, which is really nice. And then I just had to basically make sure that this stick doesn't touch the floor, because then we are in trouble. But yeah, that's basically it in terms of the animation. It really does the job in this case. And when it comes to rendering, it's even more simple. So I'll just go ahead and activate our Redshift render view. I'll go ahead and dock it to my left-hand side here, just so we can do the rendering while we are working. So we'll just go ahead and activate the IPR window, just so we can see what we're working with. So I only have a physical sound and a dome light, which I think works really, really nicely in outdoor environments or outdoor lighting setups. Ironically, the dome light that I'm using actually has a interior HDRI to it, but it's the physical sun that is doing the really heavy lifting in this case. So we'll go ahead and deactivate the dome light just to see what this is doing. I also, if we hop out to the perspective view, I have this like really rough tree model that I'm just using here to create a gobo. In the actual artwork, I use some Grayscale Gorilla assets, for example, the animated tree gobo, which is really nice. And I also used a wood texture, which was called Hickory Unfinished, I think, in the Grayscale Gorilla library. Obviously, I can't sell my files with those assets included, so I just switched out something else. So anyways, as you can tell, it looks really, really good just with the physical sun added to it. Like we can rotate this around and see, you know, what kind of cool looks that we can get depending on the lighting angle here. Also, like the level of the sun. Is it you know, midday? Is it evening? Who knows? But so the dome light that I'm using is basically just to add some like secondary, you know, bounces in the scene, because since the physical sun just adds a very, very direct and hard light. So I don't really have that much intensity. I just set it to 0.32 in my case. I mean, if you blast it up, you can see that you really, really blow out the scene. And I kind of wanted a semi-dramatic looking scene, right? And if you're wondering why my render goes noise-free so quickly, it is because I'm using denoising usually. It depends on what kind of look you're trying to achieve. If you are working with really, really fine detailed textures, it might not be the best way moving forward, but I really like it. For these kind of scenes where you're working with subsurface scattering, you might have a hard time getting rid of that noise, so I really enjoy having denoising activated. And you can only have the optics denoiser if you have an NVIDIA card, which I have since I'm on a PC. So if you're on a Mac, you can't really do that kind of denoising, I believe. But yeah, anyways. Now the trick with the HDRI is that you kind of want it to be in the same angle as the sunlight. So for example, if I put the HDRI at a opposite angle, I mean, you don't really see it right now because the HDRI is so soft, but if the HDRI was really bright, I mean, we're basically, you know, throwing in lights from all directions, which is something that you don't want. You don't want light affecting every single direction in your scene. You want, you know, guided shadows and highlights that have contrast, and you don't get contrast by putting lights all over your scene, because then you're just removing all shadows. So that's kind of my reasoning behind it. I just want some additional extra small bounces in the same direction as our sunlight. So yeah, that's it. So a lot of the heavy lifting is also being done with the subsurface material that we're working with here. And that's the ice cream material here. So I'll just go ahead and double click that, get our node editor undocked so we can see what we are doing here. So, I mean, as you can tell, there's not a lot of complexity here. And the funny thing is that this isn't really used even in our final result. This was just me playing around, and I'll show you what this does in a bit. But yeah, I mean, the standard material here is just set up with a simple yellow, nice color, subsurface set to 1, the scale set to 1. If you increase the scale here, the radius of the subsurface will increase dramatically. So I set this to a pretty low value. If you increase this like more carefully, you can see that it looks like more and more see-through the more you increase this. I mean, which is cool, but I kind of wanted it to look like a pretty dense ice cream. So I set it to 1 in my case. And I've also set it to random walk, which is a really nice looking subsurface effect in this case. And obviously you kind of want the reflection to be really shiny in this case. Now, as you can tell, I plugged this little setup here into the roughness. So I'm controlling the roughness with this color. So the darker it gets, the more shiny it gets, and the brighter it gets, the opposite. So what I'm doing here is basically I tried out, I mean, this is just more taste based. I tried out, I just deactivate the IPR for now, adding a vertex map, which is something that you can do procedurally in Cinema. And as you can tell, if I activate this, you can see that this vertex map, so this is just a linear field that I added. You can just, if you add a vertex map and add a linear field, that's how you get it. And then you can, you know, drag it around and do whatever you want with it. So I'll just delete that. So I set a linear field that affects the shape from the ground up, basically. So I had like a cutoff point somewhere around here. And if you put in a vertex map in your material, you add it using a node called the vertex attribute. So once you do that, you just pull in your vertex map tag here under attribute name, and there you have it. And the way the vertex map looks when you add it to material is this. So I'll just solo this node by clicking the S button here. So it just turns into a mask basically. And what you can do here is that you can use this color value to drive different attributes in your material. So what I'm doing is plugging it into a ramp. And right now the ramp doesn't have any other colors in it. But if we do add another color, let's say, for example, a white color here, like this. So now the dark value here says that it will be shiny along the bottom here, and it's set to 5% because I don't want it to be like 100% shiny. I want it to have some slight roughness. And the further up along the shape that you go, the rougher the reflection will get. So the effect that we get by doing that when I plug it into the roughness of our reflection is this. So right now we have a really, really rough reflection on the main body here of the ice cream, and then it goes wet and shiny along the parts of the ice cream that are melting, which is a cool effect. I do really, I really like the look of this. If we increase the fall off as well, we can have, the fall off kind of go from matte all the way to shiny across the shape instead of just this really harsh cutoff point. In my case, I decided to not use it, but I mean, it kind of looks super frosty and nice if it is matte along the main shape. So, I mean, that's kind of just up to your own preference. I'll remove this gradient knot here to kind of have a nice shiny surface all over again. So yeah, that's a pretty cool trick that you can use. Using vertex maps, you can do some really cool procedural shader tricks. Previously, you had to make objects editable to add a vertex map, but right now you can just do it to any object, which is amazing. All you need is a lot of geometry, and in our case, a volume builder has a lot of geometry. As you can tell, it's super, super dense. Oops, I'll just hop out here and just view this. As you can tell, very, very dense geometry, so then it works perfectly. So yeah, I mean, that's basically it. If you want to go ahead and render it out and, play around with the color, perhaps, I mean, you can create some really fun effects just by, changing the color of the object. Just remember that you basically control the entire color using the subsurface color here. This is just an old color that I used. So yeah, you can create some really cool effects, some really poisonous looking, disgusting popsicles. But yeah, I mean, it would be super cool to see if you come up with any variation. If you customize the model or whatever, you can drop in whatever shape that you like here. Like if I wanted to put in like a torus, which could be pretty cool. Let's try that. I'm just trying it off the top of my head now. So I'll just drag it into our main body. I'll zero out all of the attributes here. I'll drag it up so it fits the shape roughly here. I'll just deactivate the volume measure now, and I also need to deactivate these objects. Also deactivate the smoothing just for now. And this is gonna be weird, but we'll try it out. Okay, like this. Activate the volume measure. I need to add some more subdivisions to our torus as well, so I'll just go ahead and crank this up quite a bit. Yes, we don't have any hard polygons. I'll just expand this a bit further. So let's see how this looks. I mean, it's not too bad for being right out the box, but yeah, cool. That's looking pretty nice, actually. But yeah, feel free to tag me on Instagram if you do go ahead and change the shape or do something fun with this. Can't wait to see what any of you make using the tips from this one. But yeah, I'll stop rambling now, and hopefully I'll see you in another breakdown. Take care. Bye bye.